And there it goes. Polaris on the way with a nuclear warhead. Right on the second, the missile detonated at the intended altitude at And there it goes. Polaris on the way with a nuclear warhead. Right on the second, the missile detonated at the intended altitude at
Participation in Cactus supplied low-yield coral soil data for comparison with results obtained in Nevada soil from shots of similar yield. COA provided high-yield data for comparison with the low-yield cactus data obtained in similar soil. Successful measurement of neutron flux and spectra were made for a number of ranges. In the structural effects studies on the B-52, sufficient data were collected to substantiate a correlation between measured and analytical responses. This will establish a workable and reliable side load computation procedure.
This series of scenes taken from actual nuclear weapons tests in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s gives a quick look at a project being undertaken by the Department of Energy in cooperation with the Department of Defense to preserve and release historic films. The Department of Energy, in keeping with the administration's openness initiative, will use many previously classified and unreleased historic nuclear weapons testing films as part of its effort to detail an audiovisual history of the nuclear age. The nuclear weapons testing program has led to today's sophisticated nuclear weapons stockpile. Join us now at Trinity as the first nuclear device is prepared for detonation.
Orange was launched at 2330 hours from Johnston Island on 12 August. It was detonated at an altitude of 141,000 feet, approximately 26 miles south of the island.
We re-enter our display areas close to ground zero, once rad-safe okays us for the move up. Since the biggest value of the operation is for us to prove to ourselves that it can be done and find any weak points in the training, psychiatrists are with us to study our reactions before, during, and after the experience. It's quite an experience, no matter where you are to watch it. This kind of experience is immensely valuable for any military man.
Bomb away. There it goes. The fourth atomic bomb has been successfully detonated. First you see a blinding flash. Then comes the hemispherically shaped cloud. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
These pictures of the ascending water column show the expanding cloud of spray at the base of the column moving outward and enveloping the ships in the target array. Great quantities of radioactive water from the column descended upon the decks of the nearby vessels, and ship hulls a mile away were drenched by the wall of foaming water. Photographic tower on Bikini shows the column composed of millions of tons of water rising at an initial rate exceeding the speed of sound. The water and spray from the explosion will fall for several minutes. Here again is an excellent photographic portrayal of the boiling, foaming wall of water engulfing the ships in the foreground. This highly lethal spray was intensely radioactive.
Sandstone, 3 detonations. These were fabricated releases of power, of energy locked up within the atom from the beginning of time.
It was decided to have a 4th test called the booster shot, and was detonated on a 200-foot tower. Booster was then ready for detonation. Now for a look at the booster shot.
Watch an atomic test. Watch.
Zero.
Here in sequence are the 4 snapper blasts, detonated atop their steel towers on the 7th and 25th of May and the 1st and 5th of June.
0. In the 56 seconds it takes the bomb to fall, the men of Operation Ivy wait on Parry and Eniwetok Islands. Unlike the Mike phase of the operation, the King phase will be observed from land. The bomb is now at 8,500 feet, at 6,500 feet, at 4,500 feet, at 2,500 feet, approaching 1,500 feet. Watch the air overrun it.
This photograph was taken from an airplane at 50 miles.
The Army's 280-millimeter gun. When this shot was added to the program, some additional effects tests were scheduled to observe results of the low burst height. Since no gun-type assembly had been detonated since the Hiroshima bomb, the weapons development scientists had on this shot their first opportunity to study the nucleonic behavior and fireball configuration of such a device. Yield 15 kilotons.
Tons expected yield, 400 feet above the dry lake, met involved the greatest number of projects in two important objectives. Could we kill a modern submarine with an underwater A-bomb? In theory, yes. But what would be the fatal range? Could the attack crew get away?
The purpose of Red Wing was twofold: to test 17 experimental weapons and devices, to conduct some 43 weapons effects tests and diagnostic measurements associated with the 17 shots.
The Cherokee weapon was detonated on 21 May 1956 with a yield of 3.8 megatons and a height of burst of 4,320 feet. 1957, Operation Plum Bob, the sixth in a series of continental tests conducted by the Atomic Energy Commission to further our weapons development program. In terms of numbers of test devices detonated, this was the largest series ever attempted in Nevada. One technique tested the feasibility of an underground detonation. This was the Rainier shot, placed 800 feet below the surface of a flat-topped mesa at the end of a 1,900-foot-long horizontal tunnel. The successful detonation of Rainier proved that a device can be safely detonated underground with a nuclear explosion completely contained and still permit necessary diagnostic measurements. Operation Hardtack 1958 encompassed a greater variety of military effects studies than any previous nuclear test series, necessitating the division of the Defense Atomic Support Agency's review of the effects results into 4 films. Part 1 covers basic effects, particularly of megaton devices, and effects on material and structures. Part 2 describes the effects results for the 3 high-altitude shots. Part 3 is devoted to the effects results for underwater tests. Part 4 reviews the effects of sub-kiloton detonations. Orange was launched at 2330 hours from Johnston Island on 12 August. It was detonated at an altitude of 141,000 feet, approximately 26 miles south of the island. H hour for the deep water shot was 1330 on 16 May. H hour for the shallow water shot was 1115, 9 June.
This film describes the Argus experiment.
Approximately 2:30 a.m., 27 August 1958. This was the first known firing of a rocket missile with a nuclear warhead from a naval vessel. It was the first known instance of any type of nuclear weapon being fired from any vessel by any means.
As a consequence of the large number of underground nuclear explosions in the Nougat series and the devoted efforts of hundreds of technicians and scientists, an important body of knowledge has now been accumulated. This information is now undergoing extensive evaluation to determine its implications in the design of a practical underground nuclear test ban control system. In the meantime, it is anticipated that such projected nuclear explosions as Shoal, Coach, the Storax series, and the Dribble series will provide further unique data of the same general type to forward the objectives of the Vela uniform program.
Sedan was detonated at 10 a.m., July 6, 1962. This is a view taken from the top of a 1,500-foot tower, located 6 miles from ground zero. This close-up view was taken from a ground station 3 miles from ground zero. The dome rose to a height of 290 feet before it vented at 3 seconds. Sedan was detonated at 10 a.m., July 6, 1962. This is a view taken from the top of a 1,500-foot tower, located 6 miles from ground zero. This close-up view was taken from a ground station 3 miles from ground zero. The dome rose to a height of 290 feet before it vented at 3 seconds. The base surge, seen forming here, continued to grow until it covered an area about 5 miles in diameter. The main cloud rose to a height of 12,000 feet above the desert floor. This long view gives a better picture of the mass of material moved by the explosion and the early stages of cloud formation.
This film shows the preparation, transport, delivery, and emplacement of the SATM in typical parachute missions by swimmers. The flotation bag has ample buoyancy to keep the SATM afloat while the jumper gets out of his parachute and puts his scuba gear into operation. UDT and SEAL team members jump from several Navy aircraft to evaluate their suitability as carriers for SATM jumpers.
The significance of this operation was recognized throughout our military establishment. Key representatives from all the services and other interested agencies were invited to observe this historic event, a critical first for the Army.
The destructive force of 15,000 tons of TNT, a mass of rubble. Yet, less than a mile from ground zero, a human being in a shelter should have survived. House number 1, 3,500 feet from ground zero. House number 1 as the blast hits it. On News Now, civil defense observers witness effects of the blast in the tremendous glare of the fireball.
Operation Q, the atomic test program of the Federal Civil Defense Administration, as seen by June Cowan, reporter.
I had to see Operation Q through many eyes, not only my own, but as a reporter through the eyes of the average American man and woman.
0.
Newsmen and representatives from industry and scientific laboratories are invited to inspect the site. Some 350 observers, including those from 9 foreign countries, attend. The nuclear device is now placed in the shot room. Final preparations begin. The control point, located 4.5 miles from surface zero, is now the center of operations. No one will be permitted closer at the time of the explosion.
2, 1.
The surface above ground zero had risen a maximum of 6.5 feet, while 100 feet away, only a half a foot displacement is recorded. 6 months later, the cavity is reached through a drift mined parallel to the original tunnel. Exploratory probes are made and the cavity found safe to enter. This enormous cavern measures about 170 feet across and is almost 90 feet high. Here, 1,200 feet beneath the Earth's surface.
The technique used will likely be some variation of that first used in the experiment called buggy. 5 1.1 kiloton explosives in a row, 150 feet apart, buried 135 feet deep.
The United States is conducting, for the benefit of all nations, a program it calls Plowshare. The basic task in developing plowshare excavation technology is to answer this question. In order to produce a large crater with specific dimensions in a specific earth formation, what size explosive is required and how deeply should it be buried?
Some 6 miles from this tiny western Colorado town, a unique experiment will be conducted by a joint industry and government team. A nuclear explosive equal to 40,000 tons of TNT will be used to shake loose a great natural gas reserve locked tightly in a formation called the Mesa Verde. The experiment is called Project Rulison, part of the Atomic Energy Commission's Plowshare program to develop peaceful applications for nuclear explosives.
Almost 2 centuries of hunters had roamed the seas, decimating sea otter colonies. And by the turn of the 20th century, these pleasant, playful creatures were on the verge of extinction. Alaska had long hoped to transplant hard-pressed Amchitka sea otters to selected new homes where they could thrive and multiply. Operation Sea Otter Transplant could get underway. A cooperative conservation effort. The United States Department of the Interior, the state of Alaska, and the United States Atomic Energy Commission working as a team. In all, 359 sea otters by summer's end, transported and gently released into the friendly waters off the Alaskan coast. Almost 2 centuries of hunters had roamed the seas, decimating sea otter colonies. And by the turn of the 20th century, these pleasant, playful creatures were on the verge of extinction. Alaska had long hoped to transplant hard-pressed Amchitka sea otters to selected new homes where they could thrive and multiply. Operation Sea Otter Transplant could get underway. A cooperative conservation effort. The United States Department of the Interior, the state of Alaska, and the United States Atomic Energy Commission working as a team. In all, 359 sea otters by summer's end, transported and gently released into the friendly waters off the Alaskan coast.
Amchitka Island, far out in the Aleutian Island chain of Alaska, was the scene on October 2nd, 1969, at 12:06 p.m. Bering Daylight Time, when the United States Atomic Energy Commission detonated the Project Milrow nuclear explosive. Within 3 hours after the detonation, workmen and others returned to the main camp and resumed work. There was only minor damage to base camp facilities located just 4 miles from the test site.
After World War II, Amchitka was largely forgotten. 160 square miles of barren tundra, bearing the scars and decaying installations left by the thousands of American GIs who served here during the war years. This steel building, now deserted, caps a slender shaft nearly half a mile deep. At the bottom is a nuclear device which in a few moments will detonate with a predicted yield of 80 kilotons. This is Project Longshot. D-Day, October 29, 1965. Longshot was a highly successful project in the Vela uniform program of the Advanced Research Projects Agency.
It is about as far from Amchitka to Juneau, which is the capital of Alaska, as it is from Washington, D.C. to Albuquerque. When the Japanese occupied Attu and Kiska, the United States built up garrisons in the Aleutian chain, and Amchitka served as our westernmost air base. The flat southern end of the island was chosen for this first major test, where the emplacement hole was drilled 36 inches in diameter to a depth of 4,000 feet. Backfilling a 4,000-foot shaft to contain a nuclear explosion is not just a matter of pouring sand in a hole. The containment techniques used during the Milrow event were a demonstration of the state of the art.
2, 1, 0 time.
Canakin was a United States Atomic Energy Commission underground nuclear detonation to proof test a warhead for the Spartan missile of the Safeguard Ballistic Missile Defense Program. The Canakin device was predicted to have a yield of less than 5 megatons. The slow-motion camera at the recording trailer park recorded the reaction of the instrument trailers to the 2 pulses of ground acceleration caused by the detonation.
The Polaris Fleet Ballistic Missile Submarine Ethan Allen, assigned as the launching ship, was being readied for sea at Charleston, South Carolina. She was fully combat loaded with 16 Service Polaris missiles. 4 of these had been modified as a peacetime safety feature of the test by the addition of a tracking beacon and a destruct system. However, these changes in no way modified the combat capability of the missiles or of the submarine. The 1962 test of the nuclear ASROC by Joint Task Force 8 provided an underwater effects test of the nuclear ASROC anti-submarine weapon.
ASROC is a surface-to-underwater weapon for cruiser and destroyer type ships. It is primarily designed for use against high-speed enemy submarines. This film will introduce you to the ASROC weapon system. 2 different ASROC weapons are available. The torpedo and the other weapon is a depth charge containing a nuclear warhead.
Aside from the nuclear hazards involved, all implosion-type atomic weapons are hazardous because of the high explosive materials they contain. When these weapons are accidentally exposed to fires, such as those resulting from aircraft crashes, firefighting and aircraft rescue personnel need to have a realistic understanding of the extent of the dangers involved. To obtain factual information for meeting such emergency situations, the Naval Ordnance Test Station recently carried out an investigation of the effect of fire on 3 naval weapons as part of the Navy's Atomic Weapons Vulnerability Program for 1958.
Here is another look at the burst from the angle of a low-flying Yorktown helicopter.
The fiberglass deckhouse in the foreground is essentially undamaged. The Mark 25 torpedo tube is severely damaged. Another compartment of the standard DLG-16 deckhouse on the O2 level.
This is the Mark 45 torpedo, an anti-submarine weapon with a nuclear warhead. At the burst point, the warhead is detonated.
The nuclear submarine force of the United States Navy is being equipped with a long-range, rocket-propelled, inertially guided anti-submarine missile.
Let's follow this light attack pilot to find out just how he prepares for a special mission. He has 5 types of delivery methods available: the low-angle loft, medium-angle loft, high-angle loft, dive bombing, and lay-down bombing.
Thermal radiation, however, is another story. The heating effect on the surface may be significant, and the visible light emitted is a great hazard. Blasts from airbursts where overpressure exceeds 10 psi can cause substantial damage to destroyer-type ships. Blast injuries to exposed personnel, represented by this dummy, is usually severe over 3 psi. Here it was 6 psi. Likewise, knowing how your weapons will affect another ship will help maximize their effectiveness. On the surface, an underwater burst will push up a plume or spray dome when the
Talos,
a beam-riding, rocket-launched ramjet-propelled missile designed for surface-to-air or surface-to-surface use. Next, the missile is now lowered from the top of the missile house to the magazine by the strike-down elevator. And the missile is ready. The blast doors open, extending the loader rail to the launcher arm, and the missile moves on to the launcher. Both missiles move on to the launcher. Fire! Talos! Arm!
This film gives an introduction to the systems of the torpedo Mark 45. Here we can see the sections and components of the exercise torpedo. Tail cone, afterbody, exercise section, battery compartment, and exercise nose.
Capability to deliver with a variety of methods, the entire family of atomic weapons, whenever and wherever necessary. Only the highlights and basic operational characteristics of 6 missiles will be presented. These missiles are the Honest John, Corporal, Regulus, Matador B-61A, Snark B-62, and Rascal B-63.
This film is a dramatization intended to demonstrate the potential impact of an attack by 8 to 10 terrorists on a nuclear weapon storage site, and some examples of measures that could be taken to effectively counter such a threat.
At the Nevada test site, the Defense Nuclear Agency conducts weapons effects tests so that weapon systems under development can be tested for their ability to withstand the effects of a nuclear countermeasure. Hybla is a test of a new concept for conducting these tests. This new concept utilizes the output of a much smaller nuclear device than is presently used. Gases are prevented from reaching the test chamber by fast-closing doors which block the LOS approximately 300 to 400 feet from the device.
These are the signs of the time. Only in practice now, a rehearsal, a training exercise. Now, with all the elements in place, our test city is complete. From the air, its center will appear as a bullseye to the bombardier at H hour.
Eniwetok Atoll is located 2,700 miles southwest of Hawaii and 390 miles northwest of Kwajalein. It is a typical coral atoll, with a lagoon about 25 miles in diameter, surrounded by 40 islands. It is estimated there are some 125,000 cubic yards, or about 2,000 carloads of non-radioactive debris, and 6,300 cubic yards, or 100 carloads of radioactive material on the atoll, requiring removal and disposal.
This is the Mark 43. This is the Mark 57. This film will show you the shipboard part of the stockpile to target sequence, from taking weapons aboard through stowing them below and bringing them topside to aircraft loading.
General quarters, all hands man your battle stations.
Whether we like it or not, gentlemen, the nuclear weapon exists. It is to assure safety, security, and reliability in handling nuclear weapons that the Department of the Army has provided for a system of technical proficiency inspections to be conducted under the overall surveillance of the Inspector General.
How about the exercise you're going through up there? Is that something you think the men will go through with all right?
Yes, sir. I think they'll do very well, and they're mentally ready for it. They're eager and ready to go.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you here.
The commanding officer of the battalion combat team gives the signal for the advance toward the BCT objective, an area approximately 1/2 mile from ground zero.
Operation Dominic was triggered by the Soviet resumption of atmospheric nuclear testing in September 1961. Off Christmas Island, a series of weapon development airdrop tests was made, followed by later drops in the Johnston Island danger area. All drop aircraft staged from Hawaii. A Polaris weapon system test was launched from the open sea into the northeast corner of the Christmas Island danger area. Negotiations were being conducted with the British government for the use of jointly owned Christmas Island, 1,200 miles south, as a location for the airdrop tests.
Of urgency was the requirement for an evaluation of the effectiveness of nuclear detonations at high altitude for killing incoming ICBMs. Another must was the ability to detect incoming ICBMs through high-altitude detonation environment for both defensive and offensive applications. Specially designed pods were engineered to be attached to the Thor missile and deployed to pre-calculated positions from the burst. Many rocket payloads were prepared for firing into and around the weapon detonation area to obtain data on the fundamental physics of the burst phenomena. Johnston Island was the center of launch and experimental activity for the 1962 high-altitude weapon effects testing termed Operation Fishbowl. At the northwestern end of the island was the Thor launch complex, joined later by Nike Hercules and Stripey units, plus a second Thor pad. On Operation Fishbowl, nuclear detonations rent the sky 5 times over the Johnston Island. Christmas Island, 2 degrees above the equator. Discovered by Captain Cook on the 24th of December, 1777. Not until the United Kingdom nuclear tests of 1956, 1957, and 1958 did this atoll assume a stature unknown until then. In summary, no significant delays in scheduled operations were experienced because of unfavorable weather. In the 78-day period between 25 April and 12 July, 24 weapon development shots were fired at the Christmas Island site. The pods were programmed to separate from the missile in flight so as to be at specified points in space near the detonation and properly oriented to acquire the desired data. P-2V aircraft, together with destroyers, provided the security and safety surveillance of the extensive danger area surrounding the theater of operations. On 25 July, the Thor vehicle for Bluegill Prime had a one-of-a-kind casualty, diagnosed as a sticking fuel valve, which caused a fire at motor ignition. Both missile and warhead burned on the launching pad. The program had advanced to a point which justified going ahead with the added airdrop events at Johnston, with the air array as the primary and only available method of obtaining much of the needed data.
We will examine the effects on the atmosphere of nuclear detonations at 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, and 250 kilometers altitude. In another view, a high-velocity shock wave is seen to race outward from the radiation front, which is still at a temperature on the order of 10,000 degrees. The cooling fireball and debris mixture, no longer luminous, continues to rise and expand, reaching a diameter of about 40 kilometers at 1 minute. The purpose of this film is to describe some of the nuclear weapon effects on military systems and the research being conducted to determine and predict these effects. An example of a ballistic missile attack will be used to illustrate how different nuclear detonations affect radar systems. In this attack, 3 re-entry vehicles are deployed in line against a target defended by a radar and interceptor battery. The first re-entry vehicle is intercepted with a high-yield warhead.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the scarce uranium isotope U-235 is separated from refined natural uranium by the gaseous diffusion process. The Hanford, Washington Active Material Production Plant, where uranium-238, the most abundant isotope in natural uranium, is converted into a completely new fissionable element known as plutonium-239. The division of raw materials, the division of research, the division of production, the division of biology and medicine, the division of reactor development. Very important from the military standpoint is the division of military application. The mission of the Special Weapons Center includes the responsibility for ensuring weapon compatibility to delivery vehicles and providing drop test assistance to the Atomic Energy Commission. Fusion is the second process through which energy is liberated from the nuclei of atoms. The process of fusion is the reverse of fission. In fission, a nucleus of an atom of high atomic weight is broken up to form other elements. But in fusion, the nuclei of 2 lighter elements are combined to make a heavier element and to release a great amount of energy. Fusion in nuclear weapons utilizes 2 of the isotopes of hydrogen to release energy. They are deuterium and tritium.
The Mark III, more familiarly known as the Fat Man, was our first implosion-type atomic weapon. An improvement of the Mark III, the Mark IV, developed after World War II, the Mark V has a built-in mechanism to perform the insertion of the capsule and the cord high explosive. The need for a tactical weapon led to the development of the Mark VII. The Mark XII weapon, also designed to be carried externally, is even lighter and smaller than the Mark VII. The Mark IX artillery-fired atomic projectile is for use in the Army's 280-millimeter gun.
The Department of Defense requirements for new or improved atomic weapons have been met. The various manufacturers under contract to the Atomic Energy Commission establish production of weapons and component parts for delivery to the designated AEC and military storage sites. The Atomic Weapons Organization's highly trained technicians are charged with the important mission of inspection, maintenance, assembly, test, and modernization of weapons stored at the sites. Depending on the urgency of a combat situation, various weapon configurations are available. If time is an important factor, a weapon that has been in a ready storage condition may be selected for use. Although air transportation is normally used, a weapon may make its trip to the forward staging area by various means. With respect to the Army, and to complete the overall picture of Department of Defense capabilities, Army Ordnance Atomic Weapons General and Direct Support Units have been provided to ensure efficient support in the stockpile-to-target sequence for atomic artillery shells, guided missiles, ballistic rockets, and atomic demolition munitions. This is an airburst of a typical nuclear weapon exploded at a height of about 2,000 feet. This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud. At still greater heights, ice crystals form and flow over the edges of the cloud to form a pure white color. What can we do to increase the destructive effect? Or conversely, how can we protect ourselves from it? An atomic shock wave can envelop a structure and completely destroy it by pressure and dynamic wind effects. A nuclear weapon represents potentials outside the concepts of conventional weapons. But this is not an ultimate weapon, nor one calling for unreasoning fear. It is merely another arm, another addition to our national arsenal.
This is Tonopah, Nevada, which in its more active days was a gold and silver mining center in the mountains of west central Nevada. About 40 miles southeast of the town of Tonopah is Sandia Corporation's Tonopah Test Range. Originally established as a bomb-dropping range, Tonopah Test Range has gradually developed into an outdoor laboratory facility. As the test shape falls, its every action is recorded by a variety of optical and electronic instruments. Near the lake bed target is the Tonopah Test Range rocket launch facility, making advanced tests possible well ahead of the availability of newer aircraft and larger intercontinental rocket systems.
This is a B-61 bomb, a lightweight two-stage thermonuclear weapon with 4 delivery options. It is one of our newest and most sophisticated weapons. Design, production, and delivery of these weapons to the military is a job of the Atomic Energy Commission. This is the story of the B-61, the story of a nuclear weapon from concept to stockpile. Within the AEC, there has never been an accident in a public area involving detonation of chemical explosives within a weapon. In no case of either commission or military custody, of course, has any accident resulted in a nuclear explosion.